You know that feeling when you want to really get something, have those aha moments click, but without drowning in info.
Yeah, exactly. That's the goal here. We take the sources you give us, dig in, and try to pull out the key stuff, maybe find a few surprises.
And today we're diving into the artist Bob Camblin. We've got some specifics on his activities back in 1959, and then this really great collection of his own writings and quotes.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is to kind of connect the dots, see what he was doing that year and how it lines up with his bigger ideas about art and, well, everything else.
Sounds good. In 1959, looking at these sources, it seems like he was really involved down in Florida.
Yeah.
He was teaching at two places at once, the Ringling Museum of Art in Sarasota and the Longboat Key Art Center.
Wow. Okay. So busy in the teaching front.
Definitely suggests he was active in art education, sharing his knowledge while also, making his own work. A pretty dynamic time for him, I'd imagine.
For sure. And yeah, not just teaching, he was exhibiting too. Looks like 4 shows just in 1959.
That's right. Kicked off the year early January, Sarasota Art Association, a show called Two Fulbright Artists.
Okay.
It was him and Eric von Schmidt. And the local paper, the Sarasota Herald-Tribune, noted he was teaching at Ringling then.
Uh-huh.
And it mentioned he already had some pretty significant shows under his belt. Chicago, Rome, Philly, the Whitney in New York.
So already established.
Yeah, but interestingly, for that specific show, the paper points out he was exhibiting drawings only.
Drawings only. That is interesting. Any idea why?
Well, the source doesn't say explicitly, but it makes you think, doesn't it? Was it a specific project? A focus on that medium? It wasn't like he was unknown, so it feels like a deliberate choice.
Yeah, maybe exploring something specific through drawing at that moment.
Could be. Then just a bit later, in March, he's in another show,
Okay.
the Sarasota Art Association National Show. And again, the Herald Tribune provides some context.
What'd they say?
They mentioned only 16 Sarasota artists even got into this national show. It was pretty competitive.
Oh.
And Camblin was one of them, representing the Southeast region.
So making the cut in a tough field, that definitely says something about how his work was seen, even beyond just Florida.
Absolutely. Getting into a juried national show like that, it's peer recognition. Suggests his work held up against others from across the country.
Right. But the sort of the big splash that year seems to have been later, in December.
Yes, the 21st Annual Exhibition of Contemporary American Painting. That was at the Society of the Four Arts in Palm Beach.
And he won something there.
He did. An equal award in the oil section for a painting called Icarus Descending.
Icarus Descending. Okay, now that title grabs you. Icarus is usually about, flying too high, the fall.
Exactly. But listen to how it was described in the Palm Beach Post. Someone named Washburn called it an example of embracing the mystery of life with love.
With love. That's different. Not the usual warning about hubris.
Right. It suggests a completely different interpretation, maybe acceptance, or seeing something profound in that fall. It really makes you want to see the painting.
It really does. Embracing mystery with love. That's quite a phrase.
And there's more context. The Sarasota Herald-Tribune, reporting on that same show, mentioned Camblin's ability to kind of shift between styles.
Oh, interesting. So versatile.
Assume so. They noted that Sarasota artists, him included, showed, well, even if they weren't strictly doing the abstract expressionist thing, which was, huge at the time.
So he wasn't just sticking to one dominant style. He could move around.
Which suggests maybe a broader artistic vocabulary. Or just an unwillingness to be pigeonholed. That stylistic flexibility is pretty significant for that era.
Yeah, definitely. And was this Ford's show a big deal?
Apparently so.
Yeah.
The St. Petersburg Independent chimed in too, mentioning the prize money, $50.
Yeah.
But more importantly, calling the competition one of the most modern and highly rated in the country.
Okay, so $50 might not sound like much now, but the prestige was the main thing.
Exactly. It was national level recognition in a well-regarded contemporary show. Definitely a boost for his reputation.
And then there was one more exhibition listed.
Yeah, an undated one, 5 artists at the St. Armand's Gallery, also in Florida. The source notes a connection to someone officiating an all-Florida show around then, just kind of placing him within that active local scene.
Okay, so 1959. Teaching, exhibiting locally and nationally, winning awards, showing stylistic range, a very productive, very visible year for him.
It certainly seems that way. Paints a picture of an artist really engaged in his career.
All right, so that gives us a great snapshot of his activities. Now let's switch gears and try to get inside his head a bit with these quotes and writings.
Yeah, this is where it gets more personal, more philosophical, and right away you see this recurring theme of, well, time and change.
How so?
Like this quote, "Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years perhaps."
Huh. Yeah, there's this sort of dry wit there, but also, yeah, that sense that nothing's really permanent.
Precisely. And then there's this very simple, almost stark observation about cottonwood trees. Dense cluster of new branches, now when I'm gone. Look. Just that single word, look. It's like a command to witness the absence.
Wow. That hits hard in just a few words. Loss, observation.
hmm And there's a longer piece, clearly reflecting on a specific memory. Salt Air, summer 1967.
What does that one say?
He writes, as they approached, the memory of songs and music stopped. Stopped at the moment the texture of its decay became visible to them. Sad how we all aged at that moment in time.
Oof. The texture of its decay. That's powerful imagery. It sounds like a really poignant reflection on aging, memory, maybe a specific shared moment.
It really does. It feels very personal, very deeply felt. But then he also zooms way out, thinking about really big ideas,
Like what?
like the connection between, say, science and magic. He says, look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic, and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both.
So seeing art and philosophy as kind of bridging these seemingly opposite ways of knowing.
Exactly. He doesn't seem to see them as separate buckets. And he expands on that, saying he'll stick with common sense to get a perfectly average view of the universe.
Perfectly average. That sounds humble.
We'll listen to why. I think that will let me enjoy miracles on both sides of science and magic, and the nuances of the smear between the whiteness and the blackness.
Ah, okay. So the average view is actually the one that lets him see more across the spectrum, not limiting himself.
That's how I read it. He hopes to be around when science and magic meet in this intensely bright gray. It's this embrace of nuance, of ambiguity, of the space between clear categories.
I like that. Resisting easy answers, it feels very open.
Very. And that kind of honesty seems important to him personally, too. There's this line, I cannot tell a lie to myself for very long.
That's quite a statement. Suggests a real commitment to self-awareness.
I think so. And it connects to another thought. Find something in nature that completes you and then surrender. That idea of finding completion outside the self and then letting go.
Surrendering to nature, it sounds almost spiritual or deeply philosophical.
It does. And he connects intuition to certainty, too. The sixth sense is to be, without a doubt, senza dubio, no doubt. Trusting that inner knowing.
Okay, so time, change, science, magic, self-honesty, nature, intuition. A lot going on there. What about art itself? How does he talk about the process?
Well, he reflects on its purpose. Art is not just images. He starts, then says, art for art's sake has become art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake.
So art isn't just about aesthetics for him. It's become something more fundamental, tied to life, survival even.
That's the feeling, like its role evolved for him. And he has this great, almost paradoxical advice for the creative process itself.
Like what?
Step off the train of thought, to find the power that is no power, to do the work that is not work, to the true laugh, bending is not bowing.
Power that is no power, work that is not work. It sounds like finding creativity by not forcing it, by letting go of the usual ways of thinking.
That's what it suggests, right? Getting out of your own way, maybe?
Yeah.
And then there's the very direct, when you think, don't act. When you act, don't think.
Ah, the separation of the thinking mind and the doing hand. A classic artistic challenge.
Absolutely. Balancing that conscious planning with spontaneous execution.
And you mentioned nature before. It seems like he was a really close observer.
Oh, definitely. Listen to this. The cosmos waves as me with tree leaves, sun-heated air moves across the electrons of my skin. Sunlight reflects those greens. First, white, then yellow-green, and in deep shadows, blue.
Wow, that's incredibly specific. Electrons of my skin. He's really feeling the connection, the physics of it almost.
Yeah, it's very sensory. And he has these little observational snippets, almost like haikus, like not a leaf moves, and yet we all feel the cool breeze.
Lovely, capturing those subtle moments.
It shows a real attunement to his environment, which, you'd expect to feed into his art.
Makes sense. And what about learning? Does he talk about how artists develop?
He does, and it's maybe a little counterintuitive. He says, resist learning, learn to fail, learn to relax, learn to feel, learn how to really think.
Resist learning.
Yeah.
But then he lists things to learn. Failure, relaxing, feeling, thinking.
Exactly. It seems he means resist road learning, resist just absorbing information passively. Instead, focus on experiential learning, on developing intuition, on figuring things out for yourself.
Ah, okay. Like the difference between book smarts and deep understanding.
Yeah, he follows it up with, I didn't learn anything new, but I know a lot more now, which perfectly captures that idea of gaining wisdom through experience, not just facts.
That's a great line. So given all this, how did he see the role of the artist in society?
He has some really interesting thoughts there. He calls the artist the only free agent. He is not committed except so much as he desires it.
The only free agent. That's a bold claim. Freedom from what? Obligation, ideology?
Perhaps all of the above, a sense
Mhm.
of unique autonomy. And then he has these notes on the ecology of art.
Ecology of art, what does that mean?
He speculates that artists might be vital for the, quote, balance of nature simply by being.
Just by existing, not even by what they produce.
That seems to be the suggestion, that the act of observing, feeling, thinking, being an artist might itself have some kind of ecological function we don't typically recognize.
That's a really fascinating idea, almost mystical.
It is. But he wasn't naive about the art world either. He definitely expresses some frustration.
Oh, with what?
He talks about consumer art and a shift towards shock and recognition, not contemplation. A feeling that maybe things were getting superficial.
Ah, the age-old tension between depth and novelty, substance and shock value. Sounds like he was wrestling with that.
Yeah, the dilemma of creating meaningful work versus just grabbing attention.
And you mentioned paradox before. That seems to pop up again.
It does, like this. Balancing and being for and against, we missed the clouds. And for a moment regretted it. Then as lightning, the mind ripped out in flashes of variations to reach the still pond.
Wow. Holding opposing feelings, regret, and then this flash of insight. Finding clarity through tension.
Seems like it. And that other quote, resist and submit held in perfect balance. It's all about navigating these dualities, finding that equilibrium point.
Very dynamic. And lastly, it looks like some quotes really push into deep philosophical territory. Perception, reality.
Yeah, he touches on things like holograms, real time, the nature of belief versus fact, even referencing William James,
So really thinking about how we construct reality.
and how seeing itself works. He says, the real seeing has its own property of deception. It becomes a whirlpool of relationships, and concludes that art is only a partial retention of that incredibly complex reality.
So art can't capture everything. It's just a fragment of a much more complex, even deceptive perception.
That seems to be his point, acknowledging the limits of representation, the
Yeah.
subjective nature of it all.
Okay, so if we pull this all together, we have 1959, this year of real outward activity and recognition.
Right, teaching, winning awards, showing work, navigating different styles.
And then alongside that, revealed in his writings, this incredibly rich inner life, this deep thinking about time, nature, science, magic, the purpose of art, the struggle with the art world, the very nature of seeing.
Exactly. The two sides seem complementary. The active career grounded in, or maybe fueled by, this constant philosophical questioning and observation. His stylistic flexibility seems almost like a mirror of his intellectual range.
It suggests he wasn't just an artist who made things, but one who thought deeply about making things and about the world those things existed in.
A really holistic engagement, it seems. Art wasn't separate from life or thought. It was all interwoven.
So, thinking about this for you, the listener, how do these ideas from what, over 60 years ago now, land today?
Yeah, does Camblin's idea of embracing the mystery with love, maybe seen in his take on Icarus, resonate with how you approach the unknown?
Or how do you handle that balance? He talks about the thinking versus the acting, the logic versus the intuition, and whatever it is you pursue.
And that really provocative idea about the ecology of art. What if there's value in just being present, observant, creative in your own way, regardless of output?
Right. In a world demanding constant productivity, what value might lie in simply noticing, in reflecting? What forgotten things, like those absent cottonwood branches, might hold significance if we just pause to, well, to look, as Camblin wrote.